from Regrow Ag and Matta from Terra.do. So today's event will start with a Q&A with our panelists, and we'll follow that up with breakout rooms with the panelists for any individual questions you may have, and a community circle / networking session to close the event. And thank you so much to everyone that sent questions in advance. That helped us a lot with planning for this event. So really quickly, we'll get started with introductions from our panelists. And in the meantime, event attendees, please drop a 2-sentence introduction in chat. You can tell us your name, your current role, why are you here, and then also share your LinkedIn. So yeah, if the panelists could introduce themselves, I think Kate could start, and then Patrick, Nikki, then Janet.
Good morning. My name is Kate Berni. I work for Activate as the talent acquisition manager. Before then, I was at Amazon.com and then AWS, so technically overall Archie and Amazon. And that's when I began my corporate recruiting experience, tech recruiting experience, and then before that, I was a program director for a nonprofit. So it's kind of how I end up here today.
Get off mute. Thank you, Kate. My name is Patrick Burke. I work at Watershed as the first recruiter. We're about number 14. We're about 45 right now, looking to grow quite a bit. Bit about my background, I've been recruiting for about 30 years. I was 10 years at Apple, building the original iPhone team from scratch, which was fun. Early days at Square, growing them past Series B. Bunch of other startups after that, DJI, Velodyne LiDAR, and then got introduced to Watershed and fell in love with their mission and the people. So excited to talk to everybody.
Hi, I'm Nikki. I'm the head of people and culture at Regrow. Prior to Regrow, I was at Planet Labs, Udemy, and then I did HR consulting for a very long time. So I've been in the climate saving the world kind of industry for the last maybe seven years. And I'm really excited to chat with you all today.
Thanks, everyone. My name is Janet Matta, and I am head of careers at Terra.do. Terra, if you're not already familiar with it, is a climate education organization and community. And before my work at Terra, I started my career in environmental consulting for oil spill response. So had several years of time working on oil spill response for big oil companies, and then shifted into career development and consulting work. Did that at a number of universities at Springboard and SoFi, a couple of tech companies, before kind of bringing it all together and blending my interest in and focus on climate and careers at Terra. So I'm excited to be here.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for the introductions. So now just to get started with the questions. I guess the first question we have is for Kate and Patrick, but what are some key differences between climate tech PM recruiting and PM recruiting for big tech or mid-sized tech companies and smaller companies?
Patrick, would you like to go?
No, go ahead.
Okay. I would say, at least from my experience, the big difference is just the technology and systems you use. At smaller companies, I mean, at large corporations, everything is very efficient, and or you're not using top tech systems for process flows, workflows, everything about that. And then going to a smaller company, you have to build from scratch a lot, and it's a little bit more clunky and manual. It gives you a good perspective though of how things get built, and I think it's important to have both experiences. So that's the main difference, is just what systems you're using from big to large. For me, from my perspective.
Yeah, I would second that. It's being scrappier, right? We kind of like that mix of startup and big company, that you've learned kind of how it's done and how it should be done. But you don't take all of that and try to kind of do that. You have to kind of do more with less in the early days. You can't just look to your right and look to your left and grab all these resources. It's kind of on you, and a few people to get things done. So it's kind of more of a mindset and scrappiness to get that done. But we do like the big company experience either prior a bit, but not that you're not locked into it. First startup.
Yeah, you don't want to just get so complacent to like, oh, I'll just use this system and platform to do the job, but not have any idea actually how and why we use it.
Correct.
Cool. So then the next question is for Nikki and Janet. But where are you seeing the most demand for climate PMs? And you could slice this by hardware versus software, B2B versus B2C, and specific area of impact, so like energy, agriculture, etc.
I'm happy to chime in first and say that I would argue that the demand for climate PMs is sort of universal. Like every company has a product. Ergo, every company is going to need PMs at some point. And so I think that it's really more about where your area of interest is and how you want. I mean, I would say that like anything, you want to make sure that you're focusing on if B2B interests you, or B2C, or if energy is your passion, or ag, focus on companies that focus on those things. But I would think that I don't think there's a specific demand or one industry that I'm seeing that's hotter than anything else.
I would completely echo that. The only thing I might kind of add or ponder is I do think there's a specific sort of company stage where PMs suddenly start to get hired a little bit more, right? Early, you're going to have maybe one or maybe two PMs who need to be fairly senior. And then there's this, on that hockey stick of growth, suddenly people start to do kind of this more bulky hiring of PM roles. So there might be something around company stage and just volume of PM roles available. But in my experience talking with hiring managers and sort of perusing job opportunities all day long, I haven't seen any, I wouldn't say, there's more demand in one area over another. I do tend to see more opportunities in general in early stage companies that are doing kind of that high growth thing. But I don't know that limits you necessarily.
I would agree 100. I mean, yes, I agree with 1000%. Like the industry doesn't matter so much as the stage. Regrow we're at 70 employees and counting. We're Series A, and we have the opportunity for 3 to 4 PMs at this point. So, the bigger we get, the more we'll need.
Cool. So I guess along those lines, this is a question for Kate and Janet. But startups often don't hire PMs until Series B or later, like you were saying, and typically their first hire is a somewhat more senior PM. So considering the growth of climate startups, the maturity of various industries, and the increase in VC investment in the space, how do you think the market for early and mid-career PMs will change or grow in the next 1 to 2 years?
I'm happy to start on that. Just a theory. Yeah. Kate, do you want to?
No, you go for it, Janet.
Well, I think, one of the things that I've said before on panels and with folks that I talk to is over the next 2 to 4 years, I think we're going to see a lot more opportunity for earlier career folks. One of the challenges that we have right now is the industry, climate tech, or just climate in general, is still quite young. And the challenge with having a young industry and young companies, young as in the company hasn't been around that long, is that typically earlier on, you need to hire more senior people to build out the function within your organization. And once those senior people are in place and the function is there and there's some structure and some momentum, then it becomes a lot easier to do early career hiring because you've got some mentors in place who can then train and develop that talent through your organization. So as that begins to happen, I think we will see a lot more opportunities. You're going to start to see, university recruitment programs in a lot of these companies. You're going to start to see associate programs or rotation programs where early career talent can come in and learn in the organization as they kind of find their fit. But those things are just not quite feasible yet because the structure isn't there. So my short answer would be more opportunities in the next probably 4 years, but it might take us, depending on the state of investing, a couple of years to get there. The other issue is the state of hiring. If companies can't hire the right enough of the right kind of senior talent they need to help them grow those functions, we'll see a bit of a lag in the growth overall.
Yeah, I agree with Janet on that it's definitely going to increase. And I just went to look on, so Activate, the company I work for, we support early stage entrepreneurs with their first 2 years of startup. So I just went to go look at if any of them were hiring right now and what for product managers. And one that's only 2 years old is hiring one. So, and then there is, like, just like Jan said, there's one that's hiring for a senior product manager. So there are roles out there popping up for fairly new companies. That's just like a small example that I'm involved with, but it's definitely, yeah, growing.
Awesome. So I definitely hear like some themes in everyone's responses about skills, that key traits that PMs who are successfully pivoting to climate might share. So sometimes it's experience at bigger tech companies. To Patrick's point, there's definitely a lot of scrappiness there. I would love to dig into those traits a little bit more. So for Nikki and Janet, what are some of the specific traits of PMs who are successfully making that pivot? And are there any traits that you're looking for in a climate PM that might differ from just a general PM, whether it's software or hardware?
Okay, I'll go first. I would say that I think, at least in my experience, in order to move into a climate role, the thing that is most important is actually caring about climate. So this is generally roles where you have to care about the mission and the vision of the company over a paycheck or your career opportunity. Like the people that pivot and especially when you're trying to move from somewhere where you don't, like an industry you don't have a lot of experience, into when you do, the things that make people stand out is when they're just super passionate about the company and the mission and the vision. So I can't emphasize enough that when you're interviewing, really make sure that you've done your homework on the company and you're able to convey your enthusiasm, because if it's comparing apples to apples and you have someone similar skill set, similar experience, and somebody who's already worked in the industry, the thing that will make you stand out is your enthusiasm and your passion and the fact that you've done your homework. I think that those are the things that matter, especially for us, like for earlier stage, like I would say A, B stage companies where people are still building and passion is really important. So like I tell people all the time, like both at Regrow and at Planet, I would tell people all the time, we hire people who are here for our mission and not specifically for the paycheck. And you can tell when you're interviewing people who are super passionate about what you're trying to do. And so I think that is the thing that makes somebody successfully able to pivot from non-climate to climate.
I love that.
I hear that.
Yeah, I hear that all the time too, from, again, the folks that I talk to. Really, the first thing that everyone tells me when I ask, what are you looking for in your next hires, are commitment to our mission, or commitment to, passion for the problem. So luckily everybody, you can tick that box. It's just a matter of communicating it really well in your materials and in your conversations with employers and hiring managers and recruiters, I think. The other thing that I think is really interesting is often I will hear people tell me upfront, we don't expect experience in this specific area or this specific industry or this specific discipline. We don't necessarily need that. We're happy to teach you what it looks like to operate in the climate space or in the climate industry. But I also hear what is really helpful is something adjacent or similar. So enough experience so that you know your function well and you can succeed based on previous experience doing your function in something kind of similar. And then we're happy to help you kind of fill in the gaps between whatever you were doing before and what this business looks like today. And I think that's slightly different for every recruiter I talk to or every business I talk to. Some people will say, we're looking for people who've solved similar kinds of problems, but maybe they've been in completely different industries. or sometimes people will say, you know, I hear this a lot with like energy markets, for example, we want you to understand energy markets, but if you can show me that you understand energy markets, then, you know, anything else you need to know will teach you. So I think getting at that is a good, you know, this is why networking conversations are so helpful, talking with people who work in these companies that are interesting to you, even if it's not a hiring manager specifically, but just getting an understanding of what the company does. And then doing that kind of mental connection yourself between what is it that I'm going to be asked to do in this company, what's very central to the business, and then how can I demonstrate that I've had some exposure to that or have done something similar to that, and making sure that's coming through in your conversations and in your resume and cover letter and all that, I think is kind of a good recipe for navigating that gap. But I'm sure the other recruiters in the bunch will have more to say on that for sure.
Yeah,
I love that.
I would echo that as well. Is it's really kind of where you come from. You know, in fact, we take a different stance, right? That it's hopefully we're attracting, but this is all new, right? Climate is new. It's for everybody to kind of know what we are and how it's done, and is it a good business for everybody to just come rushing to the door? No, we need to kind of put a good word out, but yeah, you can see well from our website what we do, but we kind of, you know, give the whole story when you're on the phone call and really kind of, and then if they're like, then no, not a fit. And so it's after you have some conversations and you really kind of share the mission, then yes, you should be into the mission, but you don't have to drive an electric car and be a vegan and all that sort of stuff and be, you know, a climate social justice warrior to work here. But after you hear the mission, you should be excited about it.
And you also should be able to articulate what the business does, because one of the first questions I ask everyone is, in your own words, what do you think we do at Regrow, and why do you want to work here? Like, first question on a phone screen is those things. So at least, and I cannot emphasize enough, not just for climate jobs, any job, but especially in climate, you really need to make sure that you're able to articulate what they do.
Yeah, and just to echo everyone, I pivoted quite significantly from Amazon to Activate, and part of how I did it is just like Janet said, I just had a casual conversation with somebody at Activate, not a hiring conversation. It was just, hey, I really would like to get involved in climate technology, and you know, this is what I've been currently doing. Where do you see this crosspath, or like, how do you see this happening? And we just kept having more conversations, and then eventually she was like, hey, actually we need your skills here. But I was already speaking with, you know, her network. So it was interesting just how fluid that happened. But again, it was just like, I just came in like it was an interview, and just like what they said, you just have those, and everyone says networking is important, but it really is. And finding a company that you're like passionate about just what they're doing, and finding that whoever it is, just to get a little bit time on their calendar, will get that your door, and it might go somewhere else. You just never know. So finding skills that align is really key, but yeah, having that extra scrappy push to get in the door is important.
Yeah, it's great to hear that so much of getting that first climate role can rest on those relationships you're building and being able to really clearly articulate your commitment to solving this problem and your understanding of the company you're talking to. One question we have heard frequently from our members is a little bit of a detail-oriented one, like what is the importance of that domain expertise when it comes to hardware versus software? So does the importance of your domain expertise, or maybe your background in engineering or something like that, start to play more of a role if you're looking at hardware PM roles? Patrick and Kate, do you want to get us started on that one?
Yeah, it's even though we're in climate, I'll do an example. When I worked at Apple, there was a language called Cocoa that they developed, and I had a manager who said, "Oh, I want 4 years of Cocoa experience." I'm like, it's only been out for 2 years. So kind of the same thing. When if somebody really goes, "Oh, I want this great climate experience in software or hardware, different things," like it hasn't been out that long. So we very much are. We are a software company. We're making an enterprise software product. That's the background that we want. engineering, product, marketing, sales. That's really, if you have an interest, if there's some sort of education that you had and then got into software and have that background that you want, that's bonus. But the people that are total environmental backgrounds and no real kind of business or software, that relevant to us, and then they want to come work for us, it pains me that I have to kind of turn those people down, because that's our homies, right? But it's we really don't have a role for them. So for sure, enterprise software, great product. If you're a product manager, have you done great products before? If you've done kind of products, not as exciting, right? So have a strong background in software, in enterprise software, and that's for us not as much consumer. So it really kind of goes back that we're a pure software company that's in climate.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think asking, and I talk to my hiring managers a lot about this. I'm like, do we actually need them to have climate tech experience? Do we need that? Why is that relevant? And if it isn't, and because part of what we're trying to do is bring more people into this mission. So if we can spread that domain and expertise and bring more people with different experiences, and I think that's way more important too, just like the whole other aspect of it, of hiring. And so, because the clean tech space is also kind of a hard barrier to get into. So I think just keeping, especially as recruiters, like we work with our hiring managers to say, like, are these requirements or are these like to haves kind of thing?
I'd say in 2 to 3 years, there'll be 4 to 5 years of climate tech companies doing something, shipping products that then we can start poaching from them. But it's a little early. Right?
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you. So question for our internal recruiters, especially from one of our members, Richard. Our members wanted to hear about what is most often missing on the resumes that you're seeing that come across your desk, and skills that you'd like to see. And another way Richard phrased this was like, what is the typical profile of a PM you reject, and how can an applicant improve on that? Patrick, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, go back to the startup piece of it, right? Is we have a head of product looking for our first kind of senior PM and then an intermediate PM in that order, sort of thing. Is we're looking for the ability to kind of take a net new product to market, find product market fit versus kind of making marginal improvements on existing one. And we need to kind of shape that market in climate. So someone has kind of done that versus just kind of riding the wave of an existing product. That's kind of what we look for. And so when people have just, hey, they come in mid or end of a product and they're just this, on a product market, a couple of product managers on a team, and they have a section of it, and they're just kind of inching it along. At this stage in the company, that's kind of, if you don't have that experience, that doesn't work for us. And so it's really kind of honing in on that kind of new product experience that you've had, that not your entire career, but not 10 years ago either. But you've seen that, how that record plays, and you've done it before and knows what it is. So when they don't have that, that's kind of where we pass at this stage. And that will probably change in a year and a half probably, but that's where it is right now.
For us, we actually are looking for people who are, so it's really interesting and unique in that our head of product is interested in people who don't have a ton of experience. Like, she is actually looking for people that she can mold and mentor and grow. And so she's not necessarily looking for someone who has specific startup experience, as she is for somebody who has specific experience relevant to some of the things that we're actively working on, or who have like some of the people she's looking at are fresh out of school. She's like, what is the things that they've studied? What are the things they've written papers on? What are the things that they've done? But I would argue that in general, that is a really unique case, and that mostly in early stage startups, we're looking for somebody who can come in and really contribute to the building, who's like seen the movie before and knows what good looks like, so that we don't have to do as much molding and shaping and growing, because it really is all hands on deck at the early stages.
So I guess now we wanted to dive into some questions more specifically about job search strategies. And our first question is, do you find that you will fill most roles through applications via your website, referrals, or targeted outreach to potential candidates? And I guess, Nikki, if you want to start us off with this question.
Yeah, I would say that for PMs, most of our roles are filled through a combination of people who apply and then follow up. So like my CEO forwards me messages all the time that says this person messaged me. This person messaged me and they sent a really great message. I think you should call them. Or somebody who applied and then followed up with an email, or applied and then bumped into somebody at a conference and mentioned that they applied. And then also obviously referrals. Referrals help. Our employees are our best source of our employees, and our network are our best source of candidates, because people will say, I know this person, they're looking for something, they're great, you should talk to them. But I would say that where we are right now, inbound applications tends to be where we're getting the most amount of traction.
I would say watershed. I've been doing this for 30 years, and watershed is probably the most. I think recruiting is the important thing we should be doing. So we actually have everybody very active. So it's probably leaning a little bit more towards inbound, meaning that referrals or friend of a friend sort of thing, where the employers are pulling them in various ways. We have like 60% right now, but I think that's also we're just kind of not known. We really want to go after the enterprise software, and everybody doesn't know about us. As we do more PR, I'm sure more will come in as well. But actually, a decent amount of applicants are on target in probably more on the business side than engineering. But I'm sure as PR changes, that will turn a little bit.
Cool. So I guess you'd say then it's generally just apply. That's the best way to be seen. And besides that, referrals are also a pretty strong source of applicants.
I think the key there is the networking, is talking to current employees, right? And getting an understanding of their experience at the company and what their path is like, and building that kind of relationship, and helping them be able to see you as a peer who they might be interested in referring. You can do that through, I hear a lot actually about recruiters who say, I found some great people through Work on Climate or through the Slack groups, because they can see, that you're engaged and have a level of interest, and you're networking and having some conversations there. And that's how you're reaching out to folks at the company. So, but then you also have to apply.
I would strongly, I would second that if you have some connection to the company, use that, right? If you have a soft in, then use that. As Nikki was saying, this, have a good message, right? If you have a good message to the right person, they'll oh, that's so good. I like this. I like what they said. To a CEO, to someone. The other part I'd say is, don't blanket the company. I've seen it where we have a Slack and say, hey, someone messaged me. Is this a good background? Somebody goes, oh, I saw it too. Me too. Me too. Me too. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, okay, stalker. So kind of weigh that messaging, do it very targeted. And then if you don't go in through kind of talk to some people, then probably apply. But give that your own networking a minute before applying.
I would like to second that there is a fine line between enthusiasm and creepy. And so you want to make sure that you dance that line appropriately.
I couldn't agree more. We see that at Terra for some of the applications for our roles as well. People who overdo it, make a bunch of eyes roll, and then we're not that interested in following up. Whereas people who work on building the relationship or have a good foundation of why they're reaching out to that specific person makes a much bigger difference.
And I'd say that's also probably upped a little bit because we're in climate. It's just there's this passion that people, they realize it's now, we need to do it. It's where my career needs to be, more than probably anywhere I've worked. And so that kind of creates that enthusiasm.
Cool. Yeah, so then I guess your next question here is, do you use, and this is from Karen, who I think is in the call right now, but do you use hiring software like ATS to make your work more efficient? And if so, how do you find the balance between efficiency and excessive filtering that may eliminate candidates you'd otherwise consider? And then I guess the follow-up that Karen had is, I think this is especially important when trying to build an inclusive and diverse team, and it would be great to get a peek behind the hiring curtain here. Yeah, I guess Patrick, if you want to start there.
Yeah, it's an ATS is just a method to the madness as far as the jobs and the people and the interviewing sort of thing. So it's definitely necessary. And then you use various job boards that go to the ATS. So that is a good central spot to go. And then you sometimes go outside to find people, but you end up kind of pulling them in. So as far as the efficiency versus excessive filter, us recruiters and hiring managers just need to know what you're hiring for, right? What's the background that you're looking for? Be really clear on that. Keep the biases out as far as schooling or DEI, different things like that. It's just really go to the core experience, look at that. Are they a fit or not? And that should be in your interviewing, in your resume screening. That should be in all sorts of things. Keep your own kind of biases out. And yeah, and if you're really kind of doing that helps with DEI. But be clear on what you're looking for, both on what you post and then your own knowledge, and that'll go through smoothly.
I tend to use we use Greenhouse, and I tend to use it carefully. So when I am scrolling through candidates, I've made a really conscientious effort to hide as much information as possible. So I try not to look at names. I try not to look at pedigree. I try not to look at I know that I've tried really hard to check my own internal biases, because I know what it's like to be the only, like in many places I've been the only woman in leadership, or the only person of color and woman in leadership. And so what I say is that I try really hard to try to like blind myself to those things as much as possible. And I it's not always practical, but I try to generously push people through to the phone screen, because I feel like you never know. And if you're on the fence, I always lean towards yes. But really, I try to look at the resume. And so if you have a solid resume and it's well thought out and well put together, that is a thing that's going to make you stand out. I try to make sure I'm in the right headspace, so that I'm not just like reject. Like, you have to be in the right headspace to be reviewing applications in that way. So I don't know, I guess that's like the magic behind the curtain for me, is that I'm conscientious, and I'm aware of the responsibility of doing what I do, and that there are people who deserve a chance. I most recently, not for a PM role, but for an operations role, I did an experiment that went really well, which was I intentionally generously moved people through to the phone screen. And because it is not a role, like it's not a sales role where I really need you to be able to think on your feet. And it's a role that was more designed for people who could be introverted. I actually emailed them all my interview questions in advance, so they knew what I was going to be asking of them, and they'd be able to present themselves in the best light. And so I feel like that also made a difference in terms of making sure that the most amount of people were able to present their best self. And I really felt confident in moving people through to the next round. But I think that being creative and thoughtful it's the way that I like to do it.
Love that.
Yeah, we use Airtable, so we somehow manipulated it into making it ATS. But at my previous company, we did use ATS, and I agree. Sometimes it was we would have 400 applicants, so the recruiters we had to look at your resume quickly. But I think it's important, just from like the candidate perspective, to make it so your resume is very clearly stated what that job is looking for. So you don't want any confusions on like, well, I did this and it aligns, because a recruiter, you have your resume. So making that one page really strong and clear on exactly what that role is that you're applying for is super important. You don't want to make them work too hard to figure out if you're qualified because of your resume. And that's the worst thing when and just like Nikki said, it's like sometimes you just want to let everybody in, but and like if you have that time and that role isn't a huge volume role, you can do that sometimes. But in a very high volume applicant role, you want to make sure that resume is as clear as possible. Yeah.
I'll also throw in an extra one to build on what Kate is saying here, that there's a huge advantage to applying to roles in companies that are less well known. Because you're less likely to find yourself in a pool of 400 candidates. Your pool is likely to be, 20 or 10 or 5 even sometimes, right? So, and then the Nikkis and the Patricks and the Kates can have a lot more time to look at that resume and kind of go, oh, maybe I can move this person forward or not. So kind of trying to kind of mine the field for stuff maybe that's a little bit under the radar is also really helpful.
And it gives you a chance to oh, sorry, Patrick.
No.
I was just gonna say it gives you opportunity to interview for and more interviews. The more phone screens you get, the better. And learn what you want from a company. It just practicing that is always important too.
Yeah, and I would say go back to what the position in the company is looking for, right? So back to there's a lot of interest in climate. I get a lot of nonprofit backgrounds that go, I could do that role, or I have interest in that role. Like, you're not fit, right? So I feel bad for those sorts. So kind of, don't just go because I have interest, you should look at my background. Really kind of go, if there are parts of your background that aren't as poignant, have a cover letter, tailor your resume to kind of say, this is what the skills I have, then you have a better chance if you're not on target. Get a chance.
Yeah, tailoring the resume is key for sure to every specific role. Don't just throw your general resume in there without looking at the job description.
Cool. Yeah, so I guess for a final question for this section, we wanted to ask, how do you recommend PMs leverage communities like Work on Climate as a part of their sourcing or job searching? And this isn't just with like networking, but with research and events like this event. I guess Kate, if you want to start.
Yeah, I would say utilizing Slack channels. I mean, I look at it as a recruiter, like wherever I've gone to like source candidates now, and I'm looking a lot at Slack channels lately. There's a lot like My Climate Journey is one, Work on Climate. Terra.do had an event just the other week, a couple of weeks ago. And so, yeah, there are events out there that are being posted on Slack channels. I mean, that's one that I've noticed that those keep popping up, and it's a great spot because more than likely there is a channel in that Slack that has jobs that are being constantly promoted. Because I know I promote my jobs in all sorts of Slack channels now that are really, so yeah, the more research on that, and you can actually directly message those recruiters or hiring managers because they're on there too posting.
Yeah, I would say do it all, right? It's networking, it's research, it's if you have a passion for this space, then go soak it all in. Especially if you don't have exactly the background that you'll get hired today. So if you need to build yourself up, you need to learn more, you need to coach yourself up, Terra.do would be good. To get yourself up so you can get that. That'll help. But I'd say use all the channels specifically for networking and research and knowledge for sure.
The way that I like to do this for myself, and I have seen other people have some success, is I join a Slack community and I, spend a lot of time reading first, right? Go through and kind of get a vibe for what kind of stuff is being posted and what people are responding to, what kind of posts get the most responses to kind of gauge this is what this community is interested in. And then the next place I go is the introductions channel. And I start to look for who is here and are there introductions that I think are people I might want to know more about or might want to connect with. There always are. And then I'll usually send the most intriguing of those people a direct message in the Slack channel and say, hey, Patrick, just saw your introduction and Work on Climate. Looks like you're recruiting at Watershed. I also, am in the kind of the recruiting space and would be super very interested to, connect with you and learn a little little bit more about what Watershed is looking for. Maybe there's a way I can help. Right. And then Matrick is like, oh, somebody who wants to help me. And that makes it a little bit easier for him to respond. And I do that for, maybe once a week, I'll go in and do something like that. And then I kind of keep a vibe on what's going on in the jobs channels. Are there people that I've recognized the names who are posting in the jobs channel? Could I reach out to them in a DM and say, then, hey, Nikki, saw that you were posting this PM role. Looks really interesting. I did a little bit of background reading on Regrow, and, I'd love to chat more. Those kinds of interactions. So I'd say, introductions, don't ignore that channel. Do a lot of reading first to understand the community, and then follow up one-on-one when you see something interesting.
I would echo all of that. I think that this is here for you to both learn, develop best practices, see what other people are doing, saying what they're reading, it's just a really good way to sort of to connect. And so yeah, I just echo what everyone else is saying.
You could do a little bit of thought leadership too. So, as you get a vibe on what people care about and what they're interested in, being able to give back to the community is a good way to help yourself stand out in a positive light. So sharing resources or opportunities, that always kind of goes a long way as well.
Oh, I was muted. Cool. So that concludes the Q&A portion of our panel. And thank you so much to each of our panelists for speaking. We'll be assigning attendees to one of two breakout rooms, and I think you'll be able to move through the breakout rooms